One day, mysterious gates suddenly appeared all over the world. And these gates connected to another world. This world was called Mato. Behind those gates were dangerous creatures known as shuki. They continuously attacked and hunted humans. Unexpectedly, this world also contained a special fruit of power. It was called the Peach of Power. The peach granted strength to humanity to fight against the shuki. However, only women could receive the blessing of the peach. Therefore, the entire main combat force consisted of women. And the protagonist of this story is Yuki. He dreamed of becoming a hero. However, Yuki did not possess any special abilities. So he was basically just an NPC. In the past, Yuki's older sister had been captured by the shuki and taken into Mato. That incident left a deep wound in his heart. One day, on his way home from school, suddenly a Mato gate unexpectedly opened, and the gate pulled Yuki inside. But according to the survival rules of Mato, if an ordinary person gets lost inside Mato, they can only hide their own presence. Meanwhile, they must wait for the anti-demon corps to come rescue them. At that moment, a shuki suddenly appeared, and it began chasing Yuki. Just as he fell into danger, suddenly a girl from the anti-demon corps appeared in time, and she successfully killed the monster and saved Yuki. At that moment, the girl introduced herself as Kyoka. She was the captain of Squad 7 of the anti-demon corps. But when the number of shuki increased, Kyoka told Yuki to stay behind her. She used her ability to turn a shuki into a mount. So she quickly broke through the encirclement of the shuki. Soon after, the other members of Squad 7 also appeared to support her. Himari transformed her arms into heavy weapons. Shushu turned into a giant. Nei used her sensing ability to detect enemies and assist her teammates. Thanks to their coordination, the trapped civilians nearby were rescued. However, the situation quickly became critical. Suddenly, a group of shuki fused together into a gigantic monster. At that moment, Kyoka decided to stay and fight, and she ordered the other members to escort the civilians to safety. While being pushed into a disadvantageous situation, Kyoka was forced to use her true ability. Her power allowed Kyoka to turn a target into a slave to increase her combat strength. Because she had never used this ability on a man before, at that moment, she had no other choice. So Kyoka asked Yuki to become her slave in exchange for power. Even though Yuki was afraid, he still accepted, because Yuki wanted to protect others. The moment the contract was established, Yuki immediately transformed into a powerful combat form. This new power allowed him to easily overwhelm the giant shuki. With Yuki's support, Kyoka finally delivered the finishing blow, and they successfully destroyed the monster completely. After the battle ended, the contract was terminated, and Yuki returned to his normal form. Kyoka realized Yuki's enormous potential, and she proposed that he officially become her combat slave. After the contract ended, Kyoka suddenly felt her body continue to react according to the mechanism of her ability. So she asked Yuki to activate it one more time. But Yuki quickly refused, because he sensed that the situation was not simple. At that moment, Kyoka explained that what just happened was not entirely her own intention. Because according to the rules of this ability, after the slave completes the mission, the master must give an appropriate reward. Previously, Kyoka had only used this ability on shuki, so she had never encountered such a complicated situation with a human. However, the reward mechanism continued to activate. Kyoka was forced to give another reward in the form of intimate contact. This made Yuki extremely embarrassed. It was also Yuki's first kiss. After he calmed down, Kyoka seriously explained to Yuki about the real threat that shuki posed to the human world. She believed that the current system of the anti-demon corps still had many flaws. Meanwhile, the current Supreme Commander did not care about the changes happening in Mato. Therefore, Kyoka set a goal to become the Supreme Commander in order to reform the organization. She noticed Yuki's special potential. In the end, Kyoka invited him to join Squad 7. This proposal greatly surprised Yuki. Yuki admitted that he was not good at studying or sports. Meanwhile, the only outstanding skill he had was doing housework. However, Kyoka insisted that her squad currently lacked someone responsible for logistics and daily management. She also believed that the courage Yuki showed when saving people was more important than any natural talent. At that moment, Yuki thought that, if he remained in the normal world, he could only live an ordinary life. But if he joined the anti-demon corps, Yuki would have the chance to fight against the Shuki. At the same time, he could search for clues about his older sister. In the end, Yuki agreed to join Squad 7. After that, Kyoka took Yuki back to the base to introduce him to the other members. At first, Yuki thought Thotha would become the first special male warrior of the squad. However, Kyoka introduced him as the manager and logistics officer of Squad 7. This announcement left Yuki stunned, because all the squad members possessed powerful combat abilities, but none of them wanted to handle daily living tasks. Therefore, the entire dormitory placed their expectations on Yuki. Nei was the only one who welcomed him in a friendly manner. However, when Yuki learned that Nei was only 11 years old and already an official member of the squad, he realized how humble his position truly was. But Kyoka still seemed satisfied, because Yuki had joined the squad. On the very first day, Yuki's first mission in Squad 7 was to clean the entire dormitory. At that moment, a Shuki suddenly appeared. It immediately attacked Yuki. However, the barrier surrounding the base protected him from the attack. Nei had just returned from school, and she explained to Yuki that the base of Squad 7 was located at the Demon Gate, because more Shuki gathered there than in other areas. She also added that Mato was divided into 8 regions. Each region was guarded by a different squad. Thanks to Nei's explanation, Yuki understood Mato much more clearly. But he was still not used to the fact that an elementary school student was his superior. At that moment, when the Shuki approached the barrier again, Himari immediately shot it down. Yuki worried that she might accidentally shoot him. But Himari believed Thotha was doubting her abilities. After that, Himari ordered Yuki to prepare dinner. Although Yuki was not pleased, he still had to follow the order. However, the dinner he cooked turned out to be very delicious, and everyone praised the dishes. At that moment, Yuki began to question his role in the squad. But when he asked Kyoka about it, Himari immediately warned him, because Yuki dared to question the captain. However, Kyoka spoke up to defend Yuki, and she asked everyone to treat him fairly. However, Kyoka also warned that if Yuki showed any suspicious behavior, she would not show mercy. After the meal, while Yuki was cleaning the watchtower, he accidentally saw Himari bathing. Yuki immediately hid to avoid being discovered. However, Shushu had already noticed the situation, and she took the opportunity to secretly take a photo as evidence. Then Shushu used the photo to force Yuki to serve her. So Yuki was forced to clean Shushu's room. Meanwhile, her room was extremely messy, which made Yuki feel embarrassed as well. But while Yuki was cleaning, Shushu took another photo to increase the pressure on him. Yuki believed that, if Kyoka knew about this, she would judge the situation fairly. However, before he could explain anything, Nei announced that the 3 girls would go out, and Yuki had to stay at the base with Shushu. After the others left, Shushu asked Yuki to give her a massage. Yuki reluctantly agreed, because of the experience he gained since childhood. Yuki's massage skills were quite good, which made Shushu satisfied. After that, Shushu invited Yuki to play a game, and she also set punishments for the loser. The game quickly went beyond Yuki's control, which put him in an awkward situation. At that moment, a giant Shuki suddenly attacked the base, forcing them both to stop the game immediately. Because Kyoka and the others were not present at the moment, Shushu had to transform into a giant to fight. She quickly defeated the first monster. However, a Shuki called Mafite appeared. Because it absorbed other Shuki to increase its size, Shushu tried to use Jade Body Revolution to grow larger. But her ability failed to activate, because she was being restrained by smaller Shuki. So she had to endure many direct attacks from Mafite. Yuki realized that Shushu was in danger. He also wanted to help her, but Yuki realized that he could only transform when he made contact with Kyoka. So he immediately ran inside to look for her belongings. But when Yuki kissed Kyoka's glove, suddenly his body began to transform. However, his condition was unstable. While Shushu was about to collapse, Yuki appeared in an incomplete transformation state. But when Shushu tightly held them a fight, Yuki delivered the decisive kick and destroyed it. After the battle, Yuki returned to his normal form and collapsed from exhaustion. Kyoka also returned to the base and punished Yuki, because he had forced an unauthorized transformation. She also reminded Shushu not to be careless during battle. But after that attack, many cracks appeared in the base's barrier. However, Kyoka reassured everyone that it would soon recover. To thank Yuki for saving her, Shushu promised to do the cleaning for him for one day. However, she still kept the photos as evidence. Meanwhile, in another area of Mato, a squad was fighting a Shuki that had a human appearance. But that Shuki was actually Yuki's long-lost older sister. Because when she sensed her younger brother's presence in Mato, she decided to set out to find Yuki. Today was a rare day off. So Kyoka decided to take Yuki back to visit the human world. While Kyoka was only wearing normal clothes, her beautiful appearance made Yuki unable to stop feeling nervous. When Yuki asked Kyoka about the plan for the day, Kyoka remained silent and did not answer. Back at the base, Shushu went looking for Kyoka. After asking Nei, Shushu learned that Kyoka had taken Yuki to the memorial for the victims of the Mato disaster. As they stood in front of the memorial, Kyoka recalled the past. When she was young, Kyoka witnessed the Shuki pouring out from Mato and attacking humans. Among them was an especially powerful individual she called One Horn. Because at that time the anti-demon corps had almost wiped out all the Shuki. But the One Horn individual escaped through a dimensional gate. Kyoka always remembered this grudge, and she swore that one day she would personally destroy it. After visiting the memorial, Kyoka planned to return to Mato immediately. However, Yuki suggested that they stop by a dessert shop. Kyoka agreed. When she tasted the cake, Kyoka suddenly smiled. That smile reminded Yuki of his older sister who had been lost. Yuki realized that Kyoka was also carrying a similar pain in her heart. Suddenly Kyoka's phone rang, signaling an emergency incident in Mato. Kyoka immediately used her ability. She turned Yuki into a mount form to quickly return to the base. But when they returned, Kyoka announced that a new crater had appeared 21 kilometers south of the base, and there were currently many Shuki surrounding the area. She declared that this was a mission for Squad 7. Thanks to Yuki, Kyoka arrived at the scene earlier than the other members. Kyoka ordered Yuki to provide support from above, while Himari and Shushu attacked from below. Kyoka's plan was to wait for the Shuki to merge into a giant form. Then they would destroy them with a decisive strike. Suddenly Shushu was struck by a strange source of energy. A girl riding one horn appeared in the falling snow. This was the first time everyone had seen a Shuki with a human appearance. The girl introduced herself as Aoba, and she declared that she was an enemy of the anti-demon corps. Aoba said that she was searching for her lost younger brother. Aoba also said that her younger brother was the most handsome man in the world. Right after that, Aoba attacked Kyoka and Himari. During the battle, Aoba explained that her younger brother had always followed her since childhood. But when the giant Shuki appeared, Aoba easily destroyed it in an instant. She demonstrated overwhelming strength. Yuki saw Aoba's angry expression, and he felt a strangely familiar sensation, because that expression looked exactly like his older sister when she was alive. While Kyoka was knocked away, Aoba grabbed Yuki. But when Yuki and Aoba looked directly into each other's eyes, both of them felt a strange sense of familiarity. However, Kyoka seized that opportunity to attack, which caused Aoba to be injured. So Aoba was forced to retreat with one horn. After that, Kyoka wanted to chase after her, but Yuki stopped her and reminded her that their teammates were in danger. Kyoka immediately prioritized saving Shushu and Himari. After the incident, Kyoka blamed herself, because she had allowed her anger to control her actions. Back at the base, Yuki reported to Kyoka that he had a feeling that Aoba might be his older sister. Kyoka showed some doubt, but she also admitted that the appearance of a human-shaped Shuki had never happened before. Meanwhile, Aoba was being cared for by another humanoid Shuki named Coco. Aoba firmly stated that Yuki was indeed her younger brother, and Aoba began to wonder why Yuki had joined the anti-demon corps. By the end of the day, the atmosphere at the base gradually returned to normal. Yuki decided to temporarily set aside his doubts about Aoba's identity. He believed that during their next encounter, everything would finally become clear. At that moment, Squad 6 arrived at the base. Their captain was Tenka. and accompanying her was Yachiho, who was Himari's older sister. Tenka quickly became interested in Yuki from their very first meeting. But when Tenka acted friendly toward Yuki, Kyoka clearly showed her discomfort. In the past, the squads of the Anti-Demon Corps always operated independently. However, when humanoid Shuki appeared, the Supreme Commander ordered the squads to cooperate more closely. Yachiho openly criticized Himari. She believed that Himari was too weak. That was why she had been defeated by the Shuki. Yachiho also said that Himari had tarnished the reputation of the Azuma family, and she told Himari to return home. Those words made Himari furious but unable to respond. At that moment, Kyoka noticed that her subordinates' morale had been affected, so she proposed organizing a friendly match between Squad 7 and Squad 6 to improve combat strength. The format of the match would be one-on-one battles. Tenka immediately agreed. Himari understood that Kyoka was giving her a chance to regain her honor. So Himari asked Kyoka for permission to use Yuki in the match. Kyoka approved. After dinner, Himari took Yuki to train. Himari's ability allowed her to copy and use the skills of others, but the effectiveness was usually reduced. During training, a group of Shuki suddenly appeared. Himari activated her ability, and she transformed Yuki into a new combat form. In this form, Yuki's speed suddenly increased greatly, but his attack power decreased. Himari immediately adjusted her strategy. She told Yuki to focus all his strength into his legs to compensate for the weakness. After some coordination, the two managed to defeat the Shuki. Himari admitted that she had always been seen as inferior within the Azuma family. Meanwhile, Yachiho possessed the powerful ability to control time. Himari was often looked down upon, so she was determined to prove herself in this friendly match. Yuki realized that Himari carried pressure similar to his own, so he decided to seriously cooperate with her. In the next training session, Himari tried directly controlling Yuki during battle, but when she rode on him and synchronized better with Yuki, his power suddenly increased dramatically. Because of that, Yuki was now able to defeat a Shuki with a single strike. However, the price was that both of their stamina was heavily drained. After many days of intense training, Yuki gradually perfected a high-speed technique he called Wind Sever. Their progress made Kyoka satisfied. Finally, the day of the friendly match arrived. Tenka arrived early at Squad 7's base. Himari believed that she was fully prepared to face Yachiho. At the battle location, a barrier was erected by Gina from Squad 10. Gina's ability allowed injuries inside the barrier to be healed, but only those whose names were written on the board could participate. The first match was the confrontation between the two Azuma sisters. Yachiho declared that, if she won, Himari had to return to the Azuma family. But Himari replied that she was no longer the weak girl she used to be. As soon as the match began, Himari immediately transformed Yuki, and he launched Wind Sever. Yachiho was forced to use her time reversal ability to dodge. The match had only just begun, but Himari had already noticed the sign that her sister had activated her ability. At that moment, Himari realized that a single attack would not be enough to defeat Yachiho. Therefore, she had prepared multiple tactical strategies. However, Yachiho smiled, and she said that Himari was not the only one who had improved during this time. A few minutes before the match, Himari wanted to ask Yachiho whether she had trained for today's battle. However, when she asked her sister, Himari did not receive a serious answer. But when she realized that Yachiho had not trained at all, she became even more determined to win. The match began. Yachiho used a modified gun from Mato. She planned to stop time at the exact moment Himari landed. However, before Yachiho could activate her ability, she was struck by a sudden kick from Yuki. Every time Yachiho was injured, she could rewind time by 5 seconds. After each rewind, Yachiho memorized her opponent's attacks and adjusted her strategy. Yachiho tried to activate her time stop earlier, but Himari and Yuki had already predicted that intention, so they quickly retreated from the dangerous range. Himari noticed that Yachiho had begun to sweat. She guessed that stopping time consumed a large amount of stamina. Therefore, Himari decided to prolong the battle to exhaust her opponent. Yuki sensed Himari's determination, so he fought with all his strength. At that moment, the momentum gradually shifted toward Himari and Yuki. However, Yachiho was not someone who could be defeated easily. Yachiho realized Himari's strategy of dragging out the fight. She decided to use a longer time stop. This time, Yachiho stopped time for 10 seconds. Because that amount of time was enough for her to approach and defeat both of them before they could react. But when time resumed, both of them fell to the arena floor. The spectators were extremely shocked. Because Yachiho had maintained her ability for 10 seconds. At that moment, Yachiho mocked Himari and said that she was still not capable of confronting her. Because if either of them could not stand up, the match would end. At that moment, Himari felt disappointed, because all her efforts seemed to have brought no results. However, Yuki said that he could not give up yet. He noticed that Yachiho was breathing heavily. And she was covered in sweat. That proved that Yachiho had almost exhausted all her stamina. Encouraged by Yuki's words, Himari stood up once again. She declared that the spirit of never giving up was the true strength of Squad 7. Himari decided to use her final move. Yuki suddenly charged straight toward Yachiho. Before Yachiho could stop time, Yuki cancelled his combat form, and he created a blinding flash of light to distract her, which forced Yachiho to activate time stop instinctively. However, when time froze, only Yuki was standing in front of her. Yachiho could not see Himari anywhere. But when the 5 seconds ended, Himari suddenly appeared behind Yachiho. Immediately, she delivered the decisive strike. Both Yuki and Yachiho collapsed almost at the same time. But Himari was the last one able to stand. In the end, Squad 7 won the first match. After the battle, Kyoka expressed surprise that Himari had analyzed Yuki's abilities so accurately. Thanks to Gina's healing barrier, Yuki did not suffer any serious injuries. Himari apologized to Yuki for her previous mockery. She admitted Thatha had fought with all his strength for her. While the members were preparing for the second match, a group of mysterious humanoid creatures appeared in the distance, signaling that a new crisis was about to occur. The second match was the confrontation between Sahara of Squad 6 and Shushu of Squad 7. Shushu was determined to win in order to prove herself. Yachiho, having just lost the previous match, remained silent while watching the battle. She had no choice but to stand on the side of Squad 6 to cheer for them. Because both Sahara and Shushu possessed body enhancement abilities, Shushu suggested that the two of them fight hand-to-hand first before using their special abilities. Sahara agreed. The match officially began. Sahara launched the first attack. However, Shushu quickly countered and pushed her opponent back. Sahara immediately responded with a powerful throw, which knocked Shushu to the ground. After several exchanges of blows, Sahara suggested that both of them use their true abilities. Shushu accepted and activated her ability, Jade Body Revolution, which caused her body to grow into a giant form. Sahara also used her own ability. This ability allowed her to enhance her strength based on the minutes of activation. The shorter the activation time, the more explosive her power became. However, after each use, she had to rest for 3 minutes to recover. Thanks to this mechanism, even though Sahara had a small body, she could still throw punches strong enough to stun the giant Shushu. Sahara repeatedly targeted her opponent's legs to limit her movement. But because her body was too large, Shushu struggled to dodge Sahara's agile attacks. Finally, Sahara delivered a direct strike, which knocked Shushu down. Even though she was being overwhelmed, Shushu still refused to give up. Shushu began to wonder why she was so determined. In the past, at school, she had never truly understood the feeling of competition or the desire to be recognized. But now, she realized that she wanted to prove her own worth. Sahara predicted that Shushu would shrink her body to increase speed. However, Shushu decided to do the opposite. She continued increasing her size and used a strategy of overwhelming weight. Shushu finally caught Sahara, and she delivered a powerful finishing blow. However, because she had consumed too much energy, Shushu began to weaken. At that moment, Sahara suddenly stood up again. But when Sahara fell into a brief unconscious state, suddenly her battle instinct replaced her consciousness, and her body automatically optimized its power. In that state, Sahara launched a fierce counterattack and defeated Shushu. In the end, the referee declared Sahara the winner. After the match, Gina treated both of their injuries. Shushu apologized to the captain for her defeat. However, what saddened her was not the loss itself. It was the realization that she was not strong enough yet. At that moment, Yuki tried to comfort Shushu. Yuki said that the current defeat only came from not fully understanding the opponent's ability. Those encouraging words helped Shushu regain her spirit. Then Shushu asked Yuki to close his eyes for a moment. But when Yuki did as she asked, Shushu suddenly kissed him to thank him and to encourage herself. After this match, Shushu realized that she needed to work much harder to become worthy of her position. While the friendly match had ended, Kyoka asked Nei to check the surrounding area. Nei detected 3 humanoid creatures watching from afar. One of them realized that they had been discovered, and they sent a warning that a real battle was about to begin. Immediately afterward, a swarm of monsters appeared and launched a surprise attack. Gina's protective barrier was quickly destroyed by an especially powerful individual. Kyoka immediately ordered the friendly match to stop and switched to real combat mode. Tenka led the non-combatants to retreat to the dormitory. Shushu and Sahara returned to the battlefield to support their teammates. Shushu continued using her giant form to clear a path. Sahara provided support with short bursts of enhanced attacks. In another direction, Himari confronted a humanoid creature capable of controlling lightning, but her normal attacks were not very effective. To increase her power, Himari asked Kyoka for permission to cooperate with Yuki. Kyoka agreed, but when the two established their combat link, Yuki transformed into a new form with greatly increased power. In this state, Yuki could release a concentrated blast of energy and sweep away the monsters in front of him. Kyoka continued advancing deeper into the battlefield. Any creature that blocked her path was defeated by her unique technique. Because it was a technique that did not rely on the usual mechanisms. In another area, Ren continuously summoned lightning to attack Yachiho. But because the firepower was too intense, Yachiho could only dodge. In a brief moment of vulnerability, Yachiho was struck and lost one of her arms. At that moment, the real battle officially began. Yachiho was forced to activate her time reversal ability to save herself. However, using this ability consumed a great deal of her stamina. Just as Ryan was about to deliver the finishing blow, Tenka suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Ryan immediately sensed the dangerous pressure coming from her. Earlier, Tenka had destroyed the entire monster legion summoned by Ren in an instant. According to the current reports, there were still 2 humanoid individuals that had not been eliminated. Therefore, Tenka decided to deal with one of them immediately. Meanwhile, Ryan appeared excited to face a powerful opponent like Tenka. At that moment, Squad 7 had significantly increased their combat strength thanks to Yuki's new form. However, the number of monsters arriving kept increasing. Even though the Shuko were constantly being destroyed, they continued to appear endlessly. So Kyoka decided to personally join the battle to support Yuki. Meanwhile, Sahara and Shushu coordinated their attacks effectively. However, Ren paid no attention to them, because his main targets were the squad captains. Ren fired a bolt of lightning toward Tenka. Tenka immediately teleported behind him. Ren continued launching wide-area attacks, but against someone who could manipulate space. That strategy had no effect. Tenka created a spatial vortex that injured Jiren. Jiren immediately covered his body with lightning and launched continuous attacks. However, Tenka remained almost completely unharmed. She counterattacked with a direct punch. Then she opened a massive vortex and pulled Jiren into it. Tenka's ability was called Amatsumakoto Chome. This power allowed her to manipulate space at will. Witnessing Tenka's strength, Yuki began to doubt Kyoka's path to becoming the future Supreme Commander. However, Kyoka firmly stated that she would reach that position through her own strength. After the battle ended, everyone split up to hunt down the remaining enemies. Nei reported that there were still traces of other humanoid individuals, but she could not determine their exact location. Tenka believed that the enemies might have retreated in an organized manner. Tenka praised Yuki for his performance during the battle. Meanwhile, Gina officially became one of his admirers after this event. At that moment, Himari thanked Yachiho, because she had saved her earlier. Yachiho replied that she acted for the honor of their family. Yachiho wanted Himari to return to the Azuma family. But Himari refused, because the relationship between the two sisters still had many unresolved issues. After that, Kyoka proposed that both squads actively search for the humanoid individuals to gain the initiative. Tenka confirmed that there were currently at least 4 humanoid individuals. But even though Tenka had defeated one earlier, she did not feel that it had been completely destroyed. That night, while Yuki was preparing to rest, he thought about his own path. Yuki reminded himself that this goal was to become a true hero, not someone who only stood behind others. At that moment, a teleportation gate opened inside the room. Tenka stepped out of the swirling space, which surprised Yuki, but she smiled as she looked at him, because that night seemed like it would not be peaceful at all. Then Tenka walked forward and sat down in front of Yuki. Tenka looked straight at him and said that she had been paying attention to him. Tenka admitted that it was Yuki's heart that always fought for his comrades that moved her. Tenka then teased that Yuki was younger than her, so he looked like an adorable, little pet. Those words made Yuki extremely embarrassed. Suddenly, Tenka leaned forward and kissed him. Tenka said that every time she saw Yuki fighting for others, her heart tightened. At that moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense. Then Tenka pushed Yuki down onto the bed, and she continued teasing him. Tenka even used her spatial ability to pull his jacket aside. Meanwhile, Yuki was completely flustered and unable to react. Just then, Shushu opened the door to invite Yuki to play a game. Shushu immediately saw the scene in front of her, which left her extremely shocked. Soon after, Kyoka quickly appeared and sternly reminded Tenka that entering another squad's dormitory at night without permission was unacceptable. Shushu also sided with Kyoka. In the end, Kyoka declared the meeting over and ordered Tenka to leave. However, Tenka left with a meaningful smile, because she had not given up on her intentions. The next morning, Kyoka decided to test Yuki's ability to lend his power to others. She wanted to prepare for future battles against humanoid individuals. Kyoka explained that Yuki's characteristics could change depending on who established the link with him. This would help diversify Squad 7's strategies. Nei was the first to try the experiment, but when Nei held the chain that established the connection, Yuki transformed into a new form called Infinite Chain Imperial Star. In this state, Yuki realized that his physical strength and speed had decreased, but his senses had become extremely sharp. If Yuki focused his vision, he could see through objects. This ability accidentally put him into an awkward situation, which caused Himari to panic. Because Kyoka was directly lending her power, she consumed much more stamina than usual. After the transformation ended, Nei thanked Yuki with a light kiss on the cheek. At that moment, Kyoka realized that the reward mechanism was no longer under her sole control, because now other people could also use Yuki's power. After that, Shushu asked to try the next connection. Kyoka warned that teach transformation might come with unpredictable side effects. But when Shushu became the linked user, Yuki transformed into the form called Maphite Marble. In this state, Yuki's strength increased dramatically, but his speed decreased significantly. Kyoka commented that this form was suited for overwhelming close combat. Shushu then came up with the idea of combining this form with her giant transformation ability. However, when both abilities were activated at the same time, Yuki was accidentally crushed to the ground by Shushu due to the weight difference. In the end, the experiment ended in mild chaos. Meanwhile, Kyoka looked exhausted, because she had spent too much energy maintaining links for multiple people. Meanwhile, Shushu and Himari discovered many abnormal gates appearing in Squad 7's territory. Tenka teleported the entire squad to the scene. Kyoka decided to personally command the battle, because it was her territory. During the battle, a new type of monster appeared with a super regeneration ability. However, thanks to the coordinated strategy between Kyoka and Yuki, those Shuki were quickly overwhelmed. From afar, Shikoku watched the entire battle with amusement. That new creature was actually one of his experimental creations. After all the enemies were defeated, Yuki realized Thotha had become stronger than before. At that moment, Yuki felt that the pressure and intense emotions had pushed his power to evolve. Kyoka praised Yuki, because he had protected her from a sneak attack just in time. Because of that, Yuki became more confident that one day he would be strong enough to protect the people important to him. But just as Yuki was cornered against a wall, suddenly Aoba appeared in time to save her younger brother. Aoba easily defeated the tall young man who had been bullying Yuki. At the same time, Yuki also struck down the other boy. Since childhood, Yuki had often been used as a training punching bag by his older sister. So his stamina and reflexes had gradually surpassed those of his peers. At that moment, Aoba patted Yuki's head and praised him. "Well done, you truly are my little brother." After that, Aoba decided to treat Yuki to a meal. Even now, whenever Yuki talked about his older sister, he always showed great pride. Because Yuki had gone through many hardships during this time, Kyoka allowed him to rest for one day. While everyone was chatting, Nei suddenly detected the signal of someone in danger. The anti-demon corps immediately teleported to the scene. There, a girl was being chased by 3 monsters. Himari and Shushu arrived just in time to rescue her. However, when Himari approached to check on her, the girl suddenly threw a punch. It turned out that she was Coco. And she was another humanoid Shuki. Meanwhile, the entire scene had been a trap to lure the anti-demon corps to appear. Fortunately, Himari quickly created a protective shield to block the attack. Coco summoned more monsters to surround the two of them. However, instead of continuing to attack, Himari conveyed the Supreme Commander's proposal for peace negotiations. While Kyoka and Yuki were rushing to provide support, they unexpectedly encountered Aoba. But when Kyoka ordered Yuki to attack, Aoba suddenly spoke and asked him to stop. Yuki hesitated for a few seconds. Then he listened to her and went with his sister. In the end, Aoba immediately retreated after achieving her objective. She left a chaotic battlefield behind. At that moment, the entire squad realized that Yuki had been the real target of the enemy all along. Kyoka wanted to pursue immediately, but she was forced to order a retreat. Because both Himari and Shushu were injured. When he finally woke up, Yuki realized that he was in a small village deep inside Mato. Aoba called this place the Hidden Village. The village had no peach trees and was outside the surveillance range of the anti-demon corps. Besides Aoba and Coco and several others, there were currently about 20 humanoid individuals living there. According to Aoba, all of them had once been human. The monsters outside were pure creatures. But the residents here were half human, half demon beings. Aoba believed that these still retained human hearts. At that moment, Aoba asked Yuki to stay with her instead of continuing to serve the anti-demon corps. But Yuki refused. He argued that if Aoba still had her humanity, she should talk with the anti-demon corps instead of opposing them. However, when the anti-demon corps was mentioned, both Aoba and the others showed clear hatred. Yuki began to realize that there was a deep grudge between the two sides that he had never known about. Back at the base, Shushu looked depressed, because she had failed to protect Yuki. Nei expanded the search range, but she still could not locate his exact position. At that moment, Kyoka locked herself inside her room. She was furious, because Yuki had followed someone else's command. However, Kyoka suddenly sensed Yuki's location through the unfinished link between them. She immediately ordered preparations for a rescue operation. At that same moment, Aoba realized that the anti-demon corps had approached their base. After tracking the signals, Squad 6 and Squad 7 managed to locate Aoba's hideout. Tenka showed determination to destroy the base to eliminate the threat. However, Kyoka insisted that her top priority was rescuing Yuki and avoiding unnecessary combat. Kyoka also reminded everyone of the Supreme Commander's order. If they encountered humanoid Shuki, they should attempt negotiation first. Suddenly, a swarm of Shuki appeared, but they were quickly neutralized by a time-stop ability. Shushu planned to transform into a giant to break the cave entrance. But Coco appeared and blocked the path. Coco ordered her beasts to attack. However, Sahara easily intercepted them, since they could not resolve the situation quickly. Sahara and Shushu decided to hold Coco back, so their teammates could move deeper into the cave. Inside the cave, there were no peach trees at all. This made the entire group suspicious. At that moment, Neon suddenly appeared and blocked their path. The Azuma sisters stepped forward to fight so Kyoka and Tenka could continue the rescue mission. Inside the cave, Aoba asked Yuki to stay. But Kyoka suddenly appeared. In the moment Aoba lost focus, Tenka opened a teleportation gate and took Yuki away. Seeing her younger brother taken right before her eyes, Aoba became extremely furious. Kyoka intended to complete the reward ritual to maintain her power due to the limits of her ability. However, In the current situation, the relationship between master and slave had become more ambiguous than ever. But as time passed, Aoba tracked down the location of Kyoka and Tenka. The moment Aoba launched her attack, Yuki suddenly stepped in front of them and begged his sister to listen to him. Seeing the determination in her brother's eyes, Aoba temporarily lowered her killing intent. Yuki decided to reveal the entire truth about the peaches and the Onmyo Bureau to Kyoka and Tenka. Meanwhile, Sahara and Shushu were still fighting Coco. Because of their superior's orders, they tried to avoid delivering fatal damage. However, when Coco refused negotiation, the two of them were forced to use their full strength. Another group of Shuki appeared to take advantage of the chaotic situation. The Azuma sisters quickly dealt with them. After hearing Yuki explain the truth, Kyoka declared that if the information was true, she would personally destroy the Onmyo Bureau. However, Aoba did not trust the Anti-Demon Corps, especially after seeing how Yuki had once been treated like a tool. Yuki firmly stated Thatha had voluntarily become Kyoka's partner in order to pursue his ideal of being a hero. Realizing that her younger brother had made his own choice, Aoba fell into inner conflict. However, because of their differences in belief, Aoba tied Yuki up and declared that if necessary, she would fight until the end. After that, Aoba summoned One Horn. She turned the battle into a direct confrontation. Kyoka faced One Horn. Tenka confronted Aoba. Kyoka remained calm and delivered a precise counterattack against One Horn. After their previous encounter, she had trained relentlessly to prepare for this battle. Meanwhile, Tenka used black holes and constant teleportation to attack Aoba. Aoba enhanced her speed with energy accumulated from the peaches, and she gradually adapted to Tenka's combat rhythm. On the ground, Sahara and Shushu realized that Coco possessed powerful defensive and regenerative abilities. They switched to coordinated tactics instead of attacking alone. The battle continued to escalate as other factions also began exploiting the chaos for their own purposes. Shushu voluntarily shrank her body into a tiny form. Sahara immediately grabbed Shushu and threw her straight into Kuma's mouth. The moment she entered Kuma's body, Shushu instantly transformed into a giant and destroyed it from the inside. Kuma was completely eliminated. Taking advantage of the moment, Sahara snapped off one of Kuma's sharp teeth and used it as a weapon to attack Coco. Thanks to their coordinated strategy, Sahara and Shushu managed to defeat Coco. But when another group of Shuki appeared, Sahara's ability time limit had just expired. Shushu quickly activated her recovery ability to restore stamina for both of them. In another area, Yachiho was forced to rewind time to save Himari from a deadly strike by a spider-like Shuki. Yuki noticed that Neon was using the Shuki to launch sneak attacks from behind. Every time Neon attacked, Yachiho had to stop or rewind time to protect her sister. Meanwhile, repeatedly using her ability gradually exhausted her. Neon possessed the ability to hide underground, so Himari could not attack directly. Yachiho suggested forming a circular defensive formation to wait for Neon to appear. But Himari refused, because that would make it difficult for them to regroup with their captain. Since Yachiho could not continue using her ability many more times, Himari decided to unleash her trump card for the first time in real combat. She controlled the strands of her hair and turned them into numerous energy guns. Himari fired continuously at the surrounding cliffs, causing the terrain to shake and forcing Neon to reveal her position. The moment they identified the exact hiding spot, Yachiho rewound time by 10 seconds. Then Himari launched the decisive strike and defeated Neon completely. Meanwhile, Aoba lost control while attacking Tenka. Tenka skillfully took advantage of the situation, causing Aoba to accidentally strike One Horn. Kyoka immediately seized the opening and slashed Aoba, but that was still not enough to defeat her. Tenka created a black hole aimed directly at Aoba. She had the chance to finish her off, but Tenka hesitated, because she realized that Aoba was Yuki's older sister. However, that moment of hesitation allowed Aoba to counterattack, and Tenka was severely injured. Tenka explained that if Aoba died, Yuki would suffer. She admitted that she had begun to care about his feelings. Soon after, Coco and Neon regrouped with Aoba but admitted that both of them had failed. Kyoka's forces gathered together, creating an overwhelming advantage. At that moment, Shikoku suddenly appeared and captured Koko and Neon in an instant. Shikoku declared herself the ruler of the Shuki. And she announced that her goal was the destruction of humanity. One horn suddenly betrayed Aoba after being bitten by Shikoku's snake. It regained its savage nature and turned to attack its own master. Kyoka quickly untied Yuki. At that moment, Yuki decided to stand and fight to protect his sister. Afterward, one horn was strengthened, and its armor became almost impossible to penetrate. Kyoka and Yuki coordinated their attacks but failed to break through. Yuki concentrated all his energy into his arm and began to shatter one horn's defense. But the monster suddenly shifted into a new scorpion-like form, and it charged directly toward the injured group. Without hesitation, Yuki stepped forward and blocked the charge with all his strength. At that exact moment, Kyoka cut off one of one horn's arms and its horn. Yuki used energy chains to bind the monster tightly. Kyoka unleashed the ultimate sword technique she had trained for many years. This strike was meant to avenge her homeland and the people she had lost. In the end, one horn was completely destroyed. Meanwhile, Shikoku observed the entire battle and then withdrew. She left behind a warning that the war was far from over. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in the upcoming videos. Thank you all for watching. Much love.